So, over the last 2 years, quite a few people have asked me a couple different things. Number one is, where did I find these tubs, like these specific tubs? And the other one was, where did I get these racks? Specifically, again, this rack, because everybody likes this one. So, today, I'm going to answer both of those questions and go into detail about it. So, number one, these tubs. So more specifically, it's fine. You can see them pretty well from here. So, these guys, they're 74 quart tubs. They're almost 4 feet long. This is what I use for a lot of my colubrids, my grow-out boas, as well as my adult ball pythons, considering how much larger they are than the 41 quarts or the V70s. These guys are very seasonal and hard to track down. This specific size I've only ever been able to find at Target around Christmas time. And you'll actually notice that a lot of them, especially, a couple of years ago, I used to be able to find them more often and they had different colored lids. But at Target for seasonal, as with every store ever, for every single holiday, they always like to throw a bunch of different like seasonal colors with that. So red and green for Christmas, that's where these guys are from. And then this last year, they actually came out with this new size tub, which I forgot to grab, so hang on. Is this guy right here. This is a 69-70 quart. I've seen it labeled both ways. I haven't sat there and done the full volume of it. Geometry can bite me. But this is the new sized one. This one was also found, I've only been able to find it at Target and around Christmas time. Now that being said, I have found this size tub before outside of Christmas time, outside of Target, and that was at Lowe's, the hardware store. And they were like $10 to $15 more per tub than when at Target during Christmas time. So these guys normally run between $15 and $20 a piece. I can't honestly remember how much they were this last time, because every time around Christmas, I'm like, oh, I need to get another rack, and I just buy it, and I know it's going to be a lot. That, and with inflation and everything post-pandemic and everything like that, everything's cost more. So I don't quite remember how much it is, but I want to say they're around $15 to $20 a piece. Again, really only being able to find them around Christmas time, so around Thanksgiving, post-Thanksgiving, leading up to just before and after Christmas and New Year's. Now, with that being said, that's the biggest hurdle, is number one, finding these things. The next one is, where do I find these racks for these things? So here's the deal about that. Because I use these large oversized tubs, how heavy they are, because I do a 10 stack, how high they are, I have to actually custom build all of these racks. I went into a little bit more about that in detail when I was doing my move-in videos when we moved into this facility. If you want to go check out, I have a whole playlist of like the kind of progression of that. I'll try to remember I'll put the playlist right here. If not, there's a whole playlist on my page that you can sit there and watch all, and I go into more detail about it. But the big thing about these is that these, because they are so heavy and so tall, they have to be built out of melamine. And I honestly do not like melamine because it is still wood, even though there's plastic. And the way I build these, I always leave these lids on for added security and also added humidity retention. It cuts down the risk of the humidity leaking and bleeding into these guys, because that's the bad thing about melamine is A, it's heavy, and B, it's getting harder and harder to find, and C, if you're using it for reptiles, even if you seal it, even if you put on epoxy coating or whatever liner inside, eventually you will have to replace that. And I've even had to replace individual boards, both in these and in my conventional like 41 sub-adult grow-out racks, that I've had to sit there and continuously replace until eventually I upgrade to larger, although I think it's off camera right now, but the larger V70s or the PVC cages, eventually replacing those older melamine ones. Now, I'm going to do this whole video, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to build one from scratch. I'm going to build it with using these guys. I'm essentially going to build this rack over. So these are the Christmas tree tubs. These, again, are almost always found around Christmas time. I've seen them at Walmart. I've seen them at Target. And at some container stores, you can actually find these exact ones, only a little bit clearer with a clear lid. But again, it's the container store. It's going to cost a lot more. I want to say they're around like $60 to $70 a piece. So, we're talking, the cost of an aquarium that size or even a little bit more. Now, the one that I'm going to build today, I am using those tubs. I acquired them as well as a bunch of other stuff in a collection acquisition, basically, where someone was getting in the hobby. I went and bought their animals as well as the racks and all their extra equipment stuff, which included 4 Christmas tree tubs. Now, I'm going to show you how I build this exact rack. You can use that exact same principle to build this one. You'll just adjust the size. You'll see very quickly and easily how to able to change that up. But that doesn't mean you have to use only this one. You can easily go find any other large or oversized plastic tub from Walmart, Ace, wherever, if you find one that you like specifically for your purposes, whatever species you want to use, and then just adjust the size of this melamine and overall height and everything for those. So that's that caveat. You know, finding these things difficult, time of year difficult, it's still expensive, melamine's a pain in the butt, as well as you don't have to use just these tubs. You can build a rack that has 4 of like the larger ones where they're wider and maybe a little taller, but not quite as long. You can build a rack for those just as easily. You just have to adjust the measurements of your piece of melamine. Or, I mean, I guess you could use like plywood and paint it and seal it, but I just prefer melamine. And then the last caveat is, before we get into doing this, is that I am not handy. I'm not telling you this is the best way to do it. I'm not telling you this is the only way to do it. I had a progression over the last 3-4 years, years leading up to starting this channel, where I was adjusting and trying to figure out how to make my own racks. That was a huge learning curve. Honestly, I went through more heartache and grief and throwing stuff into walls more than I ever have with 99% of the reptile species that I've chosen to work with. So, just keep in mind, I'm not exactly handy, but if I can figure this out, you can use this method that I'm about to show you. You can find your own way. You can adjust it however you need, as long as it works for you, as long as it is stable, as long as it is secure, and to make sure that it absolutely is safe for the reptile species you like. I like these because they're a lot longer. You could actually sit there and even run like a light strip inside, or one of the new VivTech bulbs, because it's an LED one and they can stand being inside of enclosures like this. You could probably put one of those inside on the underside of those ones. It might be a little hard having it being pulled out and everything like that. But anyway, we're gonna get right into building these, because someone did ask me to, actually someone asked me straight up if I could build one for them. But between the fact that I'm 45 minutes from the New Mexico border, and they're in Fort Collins, which we're outside of Colorado. It's the last major city before Wyoming. So literally the other end of the state, not to mention the inability to get these, the cost of travel, the cost of gas, the cost of all the materials. It was going to add up for that person. So I gave them a list, just like I'm going to give a list today, as well as the fact that I'm going to show you exactly how to build that. So that way, if you choose you want to wait for these exact tubs, or if you want to go to Ace or Walmart today and go purchase the tubs that you want, and then you can get started on building that. So without further ado, let's get started. So, as we can see, here are kind of the 2 basic ones that I do. So this is the one that most people ask me about, because it's the one that is like directly in the background of all the videos. And then I've done different videos about like putting animals in here. And then this is the Christmas tree tub racks that also work really well. You can see they're a little bit wider. They're obviously quite a bit taller, and they're longer as well. These things are, with the lid, just over 4 feet long. Without the lid, they're like 47 and a quarter or something like that. And then these are the big 74 quarts. So, as we back up, you can see that because of how heavy these are, and especially because, we like to do natural substrate and stuff like that in there, they get very heavy. That's why we have to build with melamine and wood, because using PVC, it's too light. When we get this high, like if, we only wanted to do like a 5 or 6 stack, absolutely, that would work just fine. But, doing 10, or in the case of, here, let's come over here. In the case of this guy right here, or not this guy right here, these are a little bit shorter. So actually I'm doing 11, and honestly, I prefer these over these. These are a little bit wider, but these are taller, and I like the taller ones. But for a while, this is all I could find for a little bit, so that's why I'm using the difference between these guys. So this is actually an 11 stack. This is the 10 stack, but we're going to stick with, today we're actually going to be making one of these. So this is going to be 4 Christmas tree tubs, and then 2 of, let's see, what do I got? I got up here, we'll decide as we build. Either we're going to do this or this. Probably this is what we'll do. So it'll look very similar to that one, and right there, if we look right there, it'll look very similar to that one. So I'm going to take you over, and I'm going to show you all the things that we're going to need. And periodically, I'll try to remember to put up the list of things, as well as at the very end, I'll definitely leave up for a while the full list of everything that is needed here. So if we look, we can, and I will essentially show you. I'm going to be building this one, but I'll be giving you lots of details and how I go about it to build this one versus that. So without further ado, let's go check out all the stuff. So forgive the mess on the ground, because it's what always happens whenever I start building stuff. I end up just grabbing things and kind of chucking them everywhere. So forgive the mess on the ground with all that in mind. So starting off with the big stuff first, we're going to need melamine. That's what we need to get started. Melamine are typically sold in 4x8 sheets, which in the end makes it very easy for this exact kind of build. So, and then we're going to need the stuff to do the sides and all the other stuff. So for the melamine, sold in 4x8 sheets. For the 74-quart tub, the one that we're not doing today, so for that one, you want them cut to 20 inches. So because it's a 4x8 sheet, you can just go, you know, like say this is the full sheet. We'll just say this is the full sheet. You know, you'll do 20, 20, 20, 20, and then you'll have this like little bit at the end. So you'll get 4 cuts. Because we're doing the Christmas tree tub, we did them at 22 inches because they're a little bit wider. So these were cut at 22 inches, and then you end up with like this little extra piece at the end you can use for something down the road, or you can just, you know, toss it if you want. I usually get these at Home Depot. Not every Home Depot will cut them for you. I always like to say that, you know, there's a reason why I think I'm not as popular as some other some of the other influencers out there, and that's because I don't dog on people. Being nice gets you very far. I lack a saw to be able to do consistent, full, large, long, straight cuts like this. So I'm just nice to the people at Home Depot, and I help them do this, and so that way we have these things cut down. So for the case of, we're going to come over here. For this guy, we need 2 sheets, because you need one for every single level plus a cap. So for this kind of a setup, we're going to do, this will be 6. And then this will actually be 11 here. So you'll need 3 for this, 2 for this. So because everyone is asking me about these things, you'll need 3 sheets of melamine cut into 20-inch pieces, 20, 20, 20, 20. So per sheet, you'll get 4 ones of these, and then same with the other ones. You could technically get up to 24 inches. But so 20 inches for the Christmas tree tub rack, 22 inches. All right, moving from there. So here we're also going to need a 2x4. The 2x4 is what I use to attach the casters on. These guys, it's very heavy and it's very, very convenient. And that's, trust me, you want that to be able to move and glide the big rack around while you're working with, you know, the heat tape and the thermostats or whatever you're going to use to heat the things as such. So for the 2x4, what we're going to do is I just have, you know, from when I originally built these, because I have done this, you know, as previously mentioned, that I used to use the 2x4 construction. I figured out a better way to do it to minimize the total amount of space, to make them slightly lighter. We used a different little piece of wood that I'll show you in just a second over there. So for a 2x4, this is just a leftover piece that I cut down into chunks. What we're going to do is this is going to attach to the bottom like that, like there, in 6 pieces. And then we're going to take the casters, as you can see, let's see. There we go, up to 100 pounds. Each one of these things is theoretically weighted for about 100 pounds, which is what you're going to need. I recommend anywhere between 90 and 120 pounds. If you want to get locks, you can. I usually get a couple just to be safe in case, you know, the ground is uneven or whatever it is, or if I'm moving it and I want to lock it in place or whatever may have you. So, you know, 2, and you'll do like 2 on one end versus the other of those. Make sure they're the swivel ones. Trust me, make sure you get the swivel ones. And then we're going to talk about these bars. So these are actually 1x3 construction. And obviously that, you know, I took a couple liberties here. I already painted these sides here. So these are painted and sealed. That takes 2 or 3 coats. Obviously you can tell one I had left over. It's a little bit, you know, you can see that a little bit of dust and stuff is collected there, but it's still nice and sealed. It hasn't warped or expanded with humidity or moisture or anything like that, which is the big thing of why I don't like melamine. Because anything with melamine, it is still technically particle board, and eventually if humidity gets to it, you're going to have to replace it, which is a giant pain in the butt. So these are the 1x3 pieces. They sell them in 8-foot long pieces. You're going to need 6. Now, always do your best to try to find as straight of ones as possible. And obviously I cut them down, and you'll see why in a second, because ignore this. This is a new little incubator project that we're going to work on. So a little bit easier to work with if you cut them down. We'll still probably end up trimming them down at the very end once we're fully done. But so this guy, we painted these both sides. Again, painted and sealed. You don't have to paint it white just because the melamine is white. You're going to match it, right? Shoe fly. So unfortunately, the way the world is right now, shipping and stock is starting to come back a little bit. But even going to 3 separate hardware stores, 2 Home Depots, and 1 locally here in town, I could not find any that were straighter than this. And in fact, these actually came from 2 different stores. And you can see they're still a little bowed. In the end, it'll still be okay because I'm going to use the most warped or bowed ones. I'm going to use the center. Theoretically, I could probably get away with 4, but I like to do 6 just in cases, for stability reasons, as well as a little bit of extra security in case, the tub starts to move back and forth in the rack. So, we're going to come over here, and we're going to look at this stuff. So, when building this, these are the tools and the things that we're going to need to build them. So, number 1, in case that you're doing this yourself, or for trimming down the things, you're going to need some sort of saw. This is the saw that I use most often, just a little circular saw. You're going to need this. And then obviously you're going to need a drill and a screwdriver to drill in and attach and put it all together, right? So that's why I'm going to use 2, because it's easier to sit there and just swap the tools than it is to actually sit there and drill and then, pull this one out, put the screw bit into the driver and then redo that. So I'm going to use these 2. We'll see how long they last, because this is a hammer driver, an impact driver. So this is a lot harder, and if you're not careful, you can easily just punch right through your wood or split your melamine. So you have to be very careful with this. We'll see how quickly I get fed up with this. For the actual screws, I found that these right here work really well. This actually came from Home Depot because, that's the largest store that I have here in the little small town. The closest small town to me is a Walmart. So that's why I use these guys, because these work very well. They're a good size length to make sure it'll go through both your board and the melamine. This will actually be used also to attach the melamine into the 2x4s, as well as I will use slightly smaller screws to attach the the casters right here. Because as you can see, they're pretty. This is pretty long, right? Actually, you know what? We'll do it. We will do that. We'll use these to attach this too. I usually use 2 separate screws for this, but we'll use this screw to attach these guys as well. So essentially what we'll do is we will attach from the bottom of this. So there'll be screws on this side. There'll be screws visible on this on the very bottom shelf, which is okay. And then for this, we'll attach like that to the bottom right there. So back to these screws. These work very well. This says interior drywall screws. They actually have drywall screws. Sometimes have smaller thread, and it doesn't adhere and grip as well. These have a little bit nice wider screws. These actually do work very well for woodworking. The same thread count is very similar to that of like a deck wood screw. Sorry, the door is open. I got a bunch of flies coming in, unfortunately. Okay, so then we're going to talk about, stupid flies. We're going to talk about this paint right here. So this is paint, all-purpose, interior, exterior, primer, multi-surface sealer, and stain blocker. So that's why I use this. It's not glossy, but it works as a stain blocker, as well as it's a sealer, and Kills is very good. It's very antimicrobial, so that's why we like this Kills. Standard base white, little paintbrush that you're going to need. And then, so when building this, the biggest 2 issues that I came across while building these things when I was, figuring this out, because, as previously mentioned, not very handy at all, is the 2 biggest things were, number 1, how the heck do I attach those bottom pieces on there and slowly build it up safely and securely, because it's a lot of weight and movement coming from those moving around as you try to adhere them when you're building them by yourself. And then the other one is making sure that we're just going to come over here. Hello, Citrus. Is that you can be able to move them and slide them and get consistent sizes in between here. And I found that using a spare tub as well as basically a spacer or a gap to be able to put into while you build them up works very well. And so to that end, as I was trying to redo some flooring in my house while I was still up in Denver, I found that this right here works very well. What this is this is a piece of flooring to use for redoing floors. Sorry, I got the flies are bugging me really bad right now. So you'll see how I use that as we move along, but you're going to want to find something that for sure expands the entire width of the board. And then you're going to want it in a couple places, both at one end and the other, in case, that way gravity does its thing where it ends up sitting lower in the back. So sometimes, it'll pull out really easily, but going back, it'll get stuck because it wasn't level. So that's why I like these. This is not too thick, but this gives a nice little decent gap. And if you look here, you can see that it is a consistent gap across all of these, because this is what I've been using. So now from this, we're going to cut away to this, and we're going to show a little bit of essentially, I'm going to show you setting up the very bottom base, and then we're going to time lapse the rest. So let's get into that. To start off with, what I have is the 2x4s on the ground first, because that's what is going to be where the casters are going to sit and act as the base and the essentially support of the sidebars. So we take the drill, we drill in, and those are going to be those 1 5/8 screws that are going to drill in through the bottom. So this is going to be the very bottom of the rack. We're going to do that on all 6 of those pieces. They don't necessarily have to be exactly 100% straight and perpendicular and even. I try to make sure that they are level and flush on the ends, on the front and the back. The middle ones, as you can see, they're not entirely exactly there, but they will line up pretty well, as well as because of the fact that the boards that I purchased were bowed. Again, if you can purchase straight boards, it'll make your life a lot easier for sure. So that's why they didn't line up properly, because once it's all built, it'll look a little bit better because of that bowed board. I messed up here. So I forgot that the casters that I got, because I already had a couple, I just went out and got 2 more to finish the set of 6. The screws that I have are too narrow in diameter to fit the casters, so I actually had to go out and buy washers. I won't include the washers in the final list. Just make sure that you remember that your screws will be able to fit the casters. If not, you'll need the washers. Actually, screw it. I'll just put in possible washers at the end. So here's what I did. I use these water buckets as basically kind of weights and stands, essentially, where to keep the board straight as possible, I should say, I use those little water buckets and I stand up another board in there to keep them there. This is what I'm showing you. You need to be very careful when you drill into that, to the particle board part of the melamine, because otherwise you'll split and break it. This took me a lot of time to be able to actually show you. So here you can see for the bottom, I drill into both the 2x4 solid wood as well as in the particle board part of the melamine. This is the part that I was talking about that's very difficult. This is why I trimmed it down, because it's essentially an extra almost 20 inches of weight and stuff flailing around at the top. Otherwise, those boards can very easily fall off. This took me probably 5 or 6 of these being built before I finally got it down to where I wasn't, breaking them off and splintering them and everything like that. So this part makes it a little bit easier now that I already got that one side attached. So we're going to line up the other 3 just like we did on the one side. You can see that I'm lining them up. I'm taking my time to make sure that they are in fact level, flush, as perpendicular as possible to that, so that way it's straight going up. Although, as previously mentioned, bowed boards, blah, 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 blah. Do, if you can, spend time in whatever hardware place, lumber yard that you can, and find the straightest boards. It will save you so much headache in the long run. So kind of sped up, cut it a little bit here. You can see that I finished up, got all of them down pat, and then again, always making sure that you didn't have multiple screws, making sure that you didn't splinter the boards too much or anything like that. You didn't splinter the board of the melamine either. So we're going to move the last little weights of that one. I had one on both sides to make sure it didn't go anywhere as I was moving it around. And then you're going to see me kind of do a little dance and stuff just like the other one to get it back up. There we go. See, casters, that's the reason why we do it. Makes it really easy. So I got them all lined up. We're going to have it here. So this is what I was saying those 2 pieces of flooring were for. This is for that gap or that buffer that will allow the tub to slide it in and out. So I put them both at the front and the back, and I put them up against the inside of the boards that are on the front and the back of the rack. So that way there will be open air in between, and hopefully that way it also won't kind of like, you know, kind of like belly bottom out in the center. Doing that, that's also another reason why we have the middle one. It adds extra support for these large tub racks. You don't necessarily need the 2x4s like I used to use for construction for the sides. Just these 1x3s are perfectly fine as long as you use slightly longer screws to be able to hold that in. And you don't super over heavy. Like if I were to dump a bunch of rocks and stuff, then that might require me to, you know, not only use wood glue, but use like longer screws, and possibly even make it to where it's 4 on each side, so 8 total. But because I normally just do, because it's in a rack system, I don't need as deep of a layer or as thick of a layer of substrate in the racks, because you can control the humidity and temps a little bit better versus like a cage, PVC, the vision cages like you see that the carpet pythons at the top, or even that glass aquarium, it usually will not be nearly as heavy. So here you go, pulling them out after I went through and I put in 2 screws per board on these guys. So you can see I'm testing it to make sure it does move out after I pull it out, and it works really fine. So we're going to continue to do that, and then you'll notice that every single time that I put one on, I always make sure that it's as level as I can to make sure that it's down all the way pat, and it's as level and as straight as I can on the front and the end. I like to lay out these screws so that way I'm trying to be much more organized. It's very difficult for people. If anyone has done any crafts or projects in a garage or a basement or shop or whatever, you'll know that stuff just gets lost or misplaced constantly. You spend like half of your time doing that. And so that's why I'm trying to be as organized as possible, not only for my sake, but for the sake of this video. And actually, this is assembling so much faster than it normally does. With it being the Christmas tree tub racks versus the 74 quarts, obviously we're not doing as many, and it is going a little bit quicker. But between using both the drills to do one for the drilling and one for the screwdriver, putting in the screws, good lord, that it's just going very, very quickly. Now, I do want to reiterate that you do not have to do these exact tubs. You can use any style of tub that you want. Just remember to, adjust your measurements. And it's going really well. You can see it's still doing its whole thing there. I also want to add, it is important to drill it out before you put your screws into the boards and into the melamine. Because it kind of gives a nice little guide and gets the screw going. You don't want to go all the way in through unless your drill bit is smaller than your actual screw that's going into it. But it does really help with a reduction of splintering or splitting of particle board. Particle board splits very easily. It cracks super, super easy. And so using the drill to go in beforehand to go all the way through the board and starting into the particle board makes it so that way it doesn't actually split the melamine. And I'm not going to lie to you, even after doing this multiple times, having to reassemble and build new all those racks in the back when I moved down to this shop, I would still split, 2 or 3 per of these big ones. I didn't split any of the boards on this one because at this point it's practice as well as, doing this so many times. It is the practice part of it, but that drilling does make it very, very helpful. Now I am speeding it up and I'm making it go very quickly, but going back to earlier where I showed you that small little clip of me drilling it in up close, that is very important. You want to try to get right in the middle if you can, and also try not to go too close to the outer edge of the boards. So like on the front and the back of the boards, where the board would, if your boards are straight, mind you, if they line up perfectly straight and flush with the outside edge of your melamine, don't have it right on the edge. Go in 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 an inch from the front of and the back of the rack, from the front parts of the melamine. That will also help the reduction of cracking. If it does crack, you can always get some, like Elmer's or Gorilla wood glue, fill in that gap, and then you can just paint over it again. You'll notice that
At this point, I'm finishing up on, and I do apologize. I didn't adjust the camera. I was just in the zone and I was going along. But I'm finishing up the Christmas tree tub part, and I'm about to move into the smaller ones because I'm trying to maximize the amount of space that I have, the larger tubs that I can use to give as much of the very tall ceilings that I have, as much space and as many places to put the animals in larger places as I can. You'll notice that at the bottom, I didn't paint the front parts of the 2x4s. They are still the bare wood. In the end, sometimes I paint them, sometimes I don't, because those don't ever really come in contact with humidity like any of the other stuff that could possibly happen from running on the top of the bottom of the tubs. I don't always, but at the end of this, you can always use paint and do touch-ups at the end, which does include those little bottom pieces and at the very top. Another reason why I said to include the saw is that once we're done with this, is that there's going to be a little bit of wood extra at the top. So as you can see, there you go, just finished up that top one. Now I have to go get the ladder, because as you can see, it's as you know, they're much taller than me. They're, about 8.5 feet tall at its highest point. I'm pretty sure. I don't actually know the full height of these guys, but this works really well. So this is the second to last one. So this is going to be the bottom piece of the first of the 70-quart racks. And again, I do apologize that I didn't adjust the camera. So I'm doing the same thing I did on all of the other ones. I'm making sure that it is level. It's all the way down, just like I did with all the other ones. Now, you're going to see me kind of move around a little bit. And again, I do apologize that I didn't move the camera or adjust that. I was 100% in the zone. But at this point, I feel like you kind of get what to do at this point. I'm just finishing this entire rack so that way you can see start to finish everything that it's going to be at the very end. I will say this, though. If you do choose, because you can use 2x4s, I chose not to because they're more expensive and you have to use longer screws to go through, which can also add to the risk of splintering of the melamine, or splitting the melamine, I should say. It will make it a little bit more stable. You'll see the rack kind of move and wobble a little bit. It does make it lighter, and it's not quite as, not necessarily stable, or it's more stable. It's not necessarily more sturdy, I should say, so more stable. That way it doesn't move quite as much. I've never had any issues since switching to these things, and I've had moved them in and out. But that being said, just wanted to, throw that out there as well, that you can absolutely still use 2x4s for those sides. I have in the past. It worked out just fine. But to circle back, because essentially the way I do these is I, do this all, and then I record it, edit it, and then I do a voiceover while watching the video. And so I try to tell you exactly what's going on while I move that. So that's me pulling those little final ones out, checking everything to make sure that the tub's moving in and out. Once you have it all done and that last piece, that last board goes on the top and you have it all screwed and it looks really nice, you're usually going to have a little bit left over. And that's what that saw is for that way you to trim that down if you want to make it nice and flush and even for a flat little pat. I left it just intact the way this one is, and eventually I'll probably go through and trim it down. But because I do not have this necessarily set up and ready to roll, that anything's going into it anytime soon. I wasn't planning on building this. Just the opportunity presented itself to where I was going to build this for you. So it's probably just going to sit unused, probably for a few months before I start moving some animals into there, because I have to get it wired with heat and thermostats and everything like that. But with that being said, this is turning out pretty well. It looks pretty good, I think. I do like the clear vision, or the clear Christmas tree tubs, if you can. Clear tubs in general of really any of the racks. The ones that I showed you at the very beginning, those were opaque. Those were the only ones that were available. Plus, they were on clearance for like $10 a few years ago at Walmart, so I had to get them. But I like the clear stuff because it allows for a better photo period for the animals. And honestly, it feels like a lot of times they like to see what is going on. Helps them be not so reactive of scared of things. Although there is the added issue of sometimes they will take pot shots at you, like my boas do sometimes, unfortunately, which isn't really the best either, but they can also sense heat, so whatever. But there you go, basically finishing this guy up right here. This is the last one that I just finished up. I'm gonna pull the spacers, those pieces of flooring, out one last time. I think this turned out pretty well. There we go, pulling it out. And we're going to do a final check, make sure it looks all good. So here we go. This is the final product right here. So the very top, there are those. Then once it's all done, all you have to do is just add your heat source, your thermostat, obviously, and you're all set, just like you would any other rack. And this is how it's done.